All work and no play doesn't make a better doctor. It makes a tired one, and tired doctors don't learn well, connect well, or care well. Building connection isn't another task on your to-do list. It's part of how you stay human throughout the process. Welcome back to the Guide to DOing Medical School. Today we are talking about wellness, not as a buzzword, not as a checkbox, but as something foundational to surviving medical school and sustaining a long career in medicine. My name is Christopher. I'm a fourth-year medical student, and I came into medicine through a very non-traditional path. Before medical school, I spent about a decade working in a science-based industry focused on systems and processes. One thing that my background taught me very clearly is this: systems without maintenance eventually fail, no matter how motivated or high-performing the people inside them are. I'm also joined today by my wife, Chastity. She's a high school math teacher, a mom of 3, and brings an important perspective to this conversation. She not only supports me and many of our friends in medical school, but as an educator, she also sees burnout regularly in her own profession and has had to combat it herself.
I'm really glad to be here. I don't live inside the medical school world, but burnout looks surprisingly similar across settings.
One of the reasons I wanted her here is that wellness doesn't happen in isolation. It's the lack of internal and external support. The other aspect I want to talk about today is that as future osteopathic physicians, osteopathy actually gives us a helpful framework for thinking about burnout and wellness.
One of the core osteopathic principles is that the body is capable of self-regulation, self-healing, and health maintenance when it's supported appropriately. Throughout this episode, we want you to listen for how those ideas show up, not as philosophy, but as practical ways to care for yourselves the same way you're trained to care for your patients.
And this matters. A 2022 global meta-analysis by Frajerman and colleagues published in Academic Psychiatry found that about 1/3 of medical students worldwide experience burnout, often starting early in training. That's not because students lack resilience. It's because medical school can feel like trying to drink from a fire hose while someone keeps turning up the pressure. Academics are usually the first place stress shows up. Medical school takes the idea of drinking from a fire hose, which you've heard a million times already, but it's still a good analogy, and somehow makes it feel optimistic. You're learning a new language, memorizing enormous volumes of information, and being evaluated constantly, often while being told, don't worry, you'll just absorb it. It sadly doesn't work that easily. Absorbing that much information requires mindful strategies and awareness of yourself. I want to share a personal example, not because it's extreme, but because I think a lot of people will recognize it. As my second round of boards approached, anxiety slowly began to drive my studying. What started as motivation turned into fear-based overworking. I kept adding resources, extending my days, and convincing myself that more hours automatically meant better outcomes. At some point, studying stopped being productive and started to feel like a punishment.
I see this pattern a lot in my students too. When material gets harder, students are often told to work harder. And yes, sometimes a lot of them do need to work harder, but also working smarter is important. If you're not using the right strategies, it doesn't matter how much you do, you're not going to understand the content. It comes down to quality, not quantity. People often forget that your brain needs time to process the information that you're consuming, especially if you want it to go to long-term memory.
Exactly. From an osteopathic perspective, this reflects a breakdown in self-regulation. The system wasn't broken, it was overloaded. Learning works best within an optimal range. Beyond that, performance actually declines. This is the theory of diminishing returns. At some point, your brain stops absorbing information. I refer to it as hitting the wall. Understanding where your wall is important. As Chastity said, strategy is also important. It doesn't do you any good to spin your wheels and grind information that isn't the best yield. Part of the struggle of medical school is understanding what to study and when. This is where your peers, upperclassmates, and your school's academic advising really comes into play. Talk to them first, figure out what strategy and content is best use of your time. Ask them for their strategies because maybe they're doing something you could try. My school provided what they called learning specialists. They were advisors specific to helping us figure out how we studied best. They also steered us away from the study traps previous students had fallen into, such as rewriting all of your notes 3 times, something I may or may not have tried at some point. Pivoting is also critical in medical school. I've had to adapt how I study depending on what class or system I was on. However, you have to remember there are only 24 hours in the day, and you need at least 8 of them for sleep. Sleep is one of the clearest examples of the body's self-healing capacity, and it was the first thing I changed. It became the keystone habit that allowed everything else to improve. Educational and clinical literature consistently shows that sleep deprivation is associated with emotional exhaustion, impaired cognitive performance, and reduced emotional regulation. These effects are well summarized by Harvard Health Publishing, which reviews how inadequate sleep affects learning, mood, and stress tolerance, especially in high-demand environments.
From the outside, this seems obvious, but it's also the first thing people sacrifice. We treat sleep like it's optional, even though nothing really works well without it. For instance, I was at a point in time where Christopher was gone for rotations, and I have a 9-month-old that doesn't want to sleep, but I also have a mountain of schoolwork to get done. And when I have to sacrifice sleep to do that, I then get sick, or my stress just gets worse. It doesn't really help.
This is where I want to come back to that earlier story. After failing boards by a narrow margin, I had to confront the uncomfortable truth that my strategy wasn't just unsustainable, it was counterproductive. It was causing me to get 4 to 5 hours of sleep per night, and that simply was not enough time for my body to recover. The anxiety and exhaustion also resulted in sleeping only 2 hours the night prior to the exam. When preparing for my retake, I rebuilt my schedule around sleep. Everything else improved. My focus came back, studying became more efficient. I actually cut my study hours nearly in half and improved my score by over 100 points. This wasn't about grit, it was about physiology. You can't outwork sleep deprivation.
So what are some of the things that you did to fix your sleep?
One of the biggest things was just having a sleep schedule, and it can take a couple weeks to lock in any kind of pattern. So just forcing myself to go to sleep every night and then forcing myself to wake up every morning at a certain time, and then having that hard cutoff, no matter where I was in my study schedule, I would just stop what I'm doing. Okay, it's time to unwind. Other thing I did was no electronics an hour before bed. I made sure that there were no bright lights or anything that could hinder me falling to sleep. I also experimented with things like white noise. I found out that I like ocean and forest noises. However, storms, I guess, give me anxiety, so that was not helpful for me to go to sleep to.
I know when I wanted to start fixing my sleep, I really liked the idea of dimming the lights 30 minutes before you are planning to go to sleep, and I started reading instead of scrolling my phone like I had previously.
One area that was also really helpful was mindfulness techniques. I often would do breathing exercises right before I went to sleep, and that helped calm my body down. There are a lot of guides online by professionals who talk about different strategies you could employ to help with sleep, so I encourage you to explore those and try things that make sense for you.
I also remember you deciding to start working out and eating better than you had previously while you were studying for the first time to really help yourself feel better in your body as well, and I think that made a big difference.
It definitely did. So one of the first things I did was, how can I make a small change or small improvement without taking a lot of study time away? I actually found a treadmill used for about $20 on an online marketplace. However, there's a lot of free things online you could do at home too. YouTube has a ton of free workout videos and aerobic videos. I actually tried one last week, and it got me into cardio zone pretty fast, which was maybe saying something about my current state of physical strength. However, I did notice that my sleep improved, I felt better, so just getting on the treadmill first thing in the morning and walking at a couple miles an hour for 15 to 30 minutes, and I often would throw a lecture on or something, or a sketchy video series, just something that kind of also helped engage my brain so I didn't feel like I was wasting my time.
But I also think it's important to know that it's okay to take a break from studying to do that as well.
Absolutely. There were times when I would go to the gym, and I had a Y membership through my school, and I would go lift weights and I listened to my favorite music, and that was okay too, because That was some self-regulation. That was some wind down and helped prepare me for the day. Now let's talk about diet. So it was really, really easy to pound 2 energy drinks and eat a bunch of junk food.
2 was a lot more than 2.
Yes, definitely. But paying attention to what I ate also mattered. So I started eating a lot healthier, avoided any kind of processed foods, and just try to keep things very simple, very basic. Didn't have to invest a lot of time in cooking or anything like that, but I felt better overall.
Yeah, it doesn't have to be anything crazy or super crunchy. Like, it could be simple. Like, you would make chicken and rice because it was protein and a good carb for yourself to help you get through your day, but it wasn't anything intense.
I also got really good about being creative and coming up with different meals that just were fast and easy.
I think it was also a lot easier for you to make those decisions because you had me there to support you through that, and we ate as a family, so we tried to eat the same things and both be healthy. It wasn't just you eating healthy and me eating a bunch of cheeseburgers in your face.
Definitely true, and I definitely appreciate that support. So let's get into mental health. It is still one of the most stigmatized parts of medical training. It's important to know that burnout doesn't always look traumatic. It isn't always someone dropping out or staying in bed all day.
Exactly. One reason mental health struggles often go unnoticed is that many people are still functioning. You're passing your exams, you're getting your paperwork done, you're showing up. You may even appear to be joyful to those around you, but internally something is slowly eroding. You feel like you're barely holding on. I would always tell people, I'm not thriving, but I'm surviving.
Osteopathic medicine doesn't separate mental health from physical health, and neither should we. Maintaining our mind and spirit is just as important as maintaining our bodies. If the mind is under constant strain, the whole system is affected. That's not weakness, that's just how our bodies work. And they are capable of self-healing when supported. For me, therapy became part of the routine maintenance, not because something was wrong, but because support helped restore balance. Having a therapist really helped me address areas of my life that had been neglecting. It gave me insight, perspective, and reassurance at times. It was really centered around my growth and even provided tools to help me cope when I needed it.
Yes, therapy is one way, but there are also mindfulness apps like Mindful or Balance, which both offer guided meditations and mindfulness techniques. There are also self-care tools like Finch. It's free to use, but it allows you to set goals throughout the day to help with self-care and even productivity. There are ways of supporting regulation before dysfunction sets in. Don't be mistaken. This isn't an endorsement for these apps. These are just ones we personally use, and we like them, and our goal is to make you all aware that there are a lot of options, and many without a cost, because med school is expensive. Do your own research, and see if anything in that realm is helpful for you.
A 2022 systematic review of mindfulness-based interventions showed medical students who used them had reductions in perceived stress and burnout symptoms. These interventions didn't eliminate stress, but they improved emotional regulation and resilience. What's important is that these tools work best before someone reaches a breaking point. They're preventative, not just reactive. That idea, prevention, is something we emphasize constantly in medicine, yet we often are terrible at applying it ourselves.
And just a reminder that self-care doesn't have to be elaborate. Sometimes it's simply creating protected downtime that you don't justify or apologize for. That's not an indulgence, that's sustainability. So for me, lately, that looks like coloring after I get my kids to bed.
Mine can also look like playing a video game that I haven't picked up in a while, or honestly just being kind to myself. Oftentimes, we're the hardest on ourselves, and giving ourselves some grace can go a long way for our own mental health.
Yeah, speaking of the Finch app, one of the things I have in mind tells me to remind myself that it's okay to rest, or remind myself that I am doing my best when I feel overwhelmed.
Whatever direction you go, try to reach out for the resources that you have, whether it be the counseling services at your school or an online therapist or any other area. Seek out resources that can be specific to your situation and that can help you best. This includes your regular doctor, who can be available to prescribe things like antidepressants or ADHD medication, things that can be really important if you are not on them, which I may or may not have been at some point.
That is true. Actually, my mental health improved a lot when I finally got on my ADHD medication.
Calling all Missouri physicians, residents, fellows, and medical students. Mark your calendars. On March 3rd, 2026, join MAOPS for Physician Advocacy Day in Jefferson City. Meet your local legislators, discuss policy, network with colleagues, tour the Capitol building. Breakfast and lunch included in this free event. No MAOPS or MSMA membership required. If you're practicing, training, or studying in Missouri, we want you here. Visit maops.org/advocacy day to RSVP today. Your voice matters. Are you an osteopathic medical student at ATSU or KCU trying to build your resume for residency but not sure where to start and kind of broke? The Missouri Association of Osteopathic Physicians and Surgeons, or MAOPS, is looking for current medical students interested in practicing in the Show Me State for their Wetzel Scholar Program. As a Wetzel, you'll receive a scholarship of $3,000 and funding to attend conferences like the Missouri Osteopathic Annual Convention and the AOA's House of Delegates. You'll also be paired with a physician mentor and become part of an awesome medical community.
Howdy, my name is Sammy DeLuca, and I am a fourth-year medical student at ATSU in Kirksville, Missouri, and I am a current Wetzel Scholar. As a Wetzel Scholar, I've had the opportunity to produce this podcast and develop it at the state and national level. I've also been to Chicago twice for House of Delegates, where I've met incredible physicians and then had the opportunity to rotate with them all across the country at places like the Cleveland Clinic. No matter where I go, though, I know I'll come home to Missouri, and that's why being a Wetzel is so important to me. MAOPS is a community dedicated to improving healthcare right here at home. To learn more and apply, visit maops.org/scholarship funding. The link can also be found in our show notes for this episode. I hope you'll apply.
You're listening to YPN's Guide to DOing Medical School. This podcast is hosted by the Young Physicians Network of MAOPS, the Missouri Association of Osteopathic Physicians and Surgeons. MAOPS has been the voice of osteopathic physicians in Missouri for the past 125 years, advocating for the osteopathic profession at the local, state, and federal levels. This podcast is created for students, by students, to help with the unique struggles of medical school, tailored to the osteopathic experience. Have a topic that you would like to hear about next season? Let us know at our social media pages, Instagram at DO_MAOPS, and Facebook at Missouri Association of Osteopathic Physicians and Surgeons. This is YPN's Guide to DOing Medical School.
For the first time this year, the Missouri Association of Osteopathic Physicians and Surgeons, or MAOPS, is offering a scholarship specifically for DOs in residency in Missouri. Whether you're in an OR in St. Louis or a mental health clinic in the Ozarks, this scholarship was made for you, the Missouri Young Physician. To learn more and apply, visit maops.org/scholarship funding. The link can also be found on our show notes for this episode.
Let's now talk about social connectedness and support systems. Medical school can be deeply isolating. Even though you're surrounded by people all the time, you study together, attend lectures together, rotate together, yet it can feel like everyone is struggling quietly in parallel. Early on, competitiveness can make it hard to be vulnerable. That doesn't just apply to good exam scores, but also to social support. Later, during clinical years, schedules fragment and people scatter across rotations, hospitals, and cities. Connections become harder to maintain and easier to deprioritize. But social support isn't optional. It's one of the strongest protective factors we have. The fact of the matter is all of us struggle in some way or another. One of the reasons that osteopathic medical schools tend to admit diverse classes is that we all have unique strengths and experiences. When part of our class is struggling with one thing, the other is succeeding. This creates an environment by design that is supportive. Being aware of that can help find support in areas you need.
Research across high-stress professions, including medicine, consistently show that strong peer and mentor support is associated with lower distress and better well-being. Humans are hardwired for community. That's biology, not personality. I know I rely on my colleagues a lot when I feel overloaded at work. I rely on my mom friends when I need help with my kids. If I isolate myself, my stress increases. But when I'm connecting with people, that buffers it.
From an osteopathic lens, this fits perfectly. We often don't forget that relationships are part of that system. You don't self-regulate in a vacuum. Some of you may need your alone time to recharge, myself included, but nearly all of us need some level of external support. For me, community didn't reduce the workload. It increased my capacity to tolerate it. Having peers I could be honest with about struggling, about challenges, about uncertainty, helped normalize the experience. When I did retake my boards, my peers really helped me cut the areas of my study that weren't productive. They remained a constant throughout the process and provided me with the feedback and troubleshooting I needed. Their support was really invaluable.
Yes, and they often remind you that you were capable of more than you thought, something that a lot of us struggle with. I do think it's also important to say that support doesn't have to come only from other medical students. Mentors, family, faith groups, or friends outside of your medicine world often provide a perspective that's hard to find inside the system. People from our church were really encouraging to you during your retake process.
Absolutely. Support systems work best when they're diverse. One person can't meet every need, and no one expects that of their patients either. All work and no play doesn't make a better doctor. It makes a tired one, and tired doctors don't learn well, connect well, or care well. Building connection isn't another task on your to-do list. It's part of how you stay human throughout the process.
So what are some things that you did when you started medical school to find those support systems? Because you moved from very far away to a place for medical school that you had never been to or been even close to before.
Definitely. So one of the things that I got really lucky on was I jumped into a campus Bible study early on, and that provided me a lot of peer support. There was a lot of also activity-based clubs like Fit Doctors Association that would do like paddleboarding or tennis or things like that. There was also intramural sports and other clubs that were not academic in nature. While there's always going to be the internal medicine club or emergency medicine club, there were plenty of social interests. However, within those academic clubs, there was also opportunities as well, one of which was volunteering. And the various clubs I was part of, we ended up making a lot of meals at a lot of homeless shelters, which was a really great way to connect with a vulnerable population that I'll see a lot in my future career.
And you also volunteered with things outside of school that had nothing to do with your school, and I think that helped you as well too.
Definitely. Looking for organizations that suit your interests is a really great way to meet people and also get out of that medical school box.
Also, don't forget that it's okay to go have fun. I know that you went out with your friends a couple of times, and that's an interesting way to meet people that are not in your medical world.
Pre-academic years usually happen after a big exam, but they are important too, for sure. I was fortunate that we had classmates that were from the area as well, and they could kind of give us the lay of the land and help us find things to do. One of the fastest accelerators of burnout at any stage of training is losing sight of why you started. And that can happen quietly, especially when the day-to-day feels overwhelming. Medical school has a way of narrowing your focus until everything becomes about the next exam, the next evaluation, the next checkbox. Over time, it's easy to stop seeing medicine as a calling or vocation and start experiencing it as an endless series of hurdles. It's like building the plane while you're flying it, and never quite getting to look out the window or remember where you're headed.
I feel this so deeply as an educator. We are often asked at professional development sessions to write down our why, and some of us even post it in their classrooms so that we can be reminded of it when things are especially stressful or hard. It's important because people who are able to connect their daily work to a deeper sense of purpose experience lower emotional exhaustion and greater career satisfaction.
That distinction does matter. Purpose isn't something you rediscover all at once. It's something you revisit often, repeatedly. From an osteopathic perspective, that connects the idea of spirit. Purpose speaks directly to that part that reminds us we're more than our productivity or performance. There has been points throughout my training where medicine kind of felt a bit more mechanical, and I was doing the work, checking the boxes, but felt disconnected from it. What helped wasn't a big epiphany. It was often patient interactions that reminded me why I chose this path in the first place. One example was this one particular patient I will never forget, and I didn't make any big discovery or cure what ailed them. What I did was listen and made them feel heard. I wasn't expecting it when they thanked me for making them feel that way, or when they told me they knew I was going to be a good doctor, though I did get really steamy-eyed, and some reason something flew in my eye just then, I don't know how. That moment didn't make my workload lighter, but it made it meaningful again and reframed the effort. Instead of feeling like endless sacrifice, the work felt aligned with something bigger than myself.
Exactly. Purpose doesn't eliminate your stress, but it gives stress context, and context matters. It's what helps us charge forward and climb the mountain in front of us, and helps us with how we experience that stress in a more positive way. Stress isn't always a bad thing, but how we handle it can be.
One of the most helpful reframes for me was realizing that medical school is just a season. It's not a permanent state. The goal isn't to optimize suffering, though it does feel that way sometimes. It's to grow into someone who can sustain this workload long term.
I have a coworker that likes to tell herself, I can do anything for 1 hour, or I can do anything for 1 day, or whatever time limit, to push herself through hard things and remind herself that they don't last forever and that she is capable of doing it.
And that's a form of self-regulation too, knowing when to push, when to rest, and when to step back and remember why you're here. Purpose is also something that evolves. Who you are as a first-year student isn't who you'll be as a resident or an attending, and that's okay. Growth is part of this process.
Yeah, you're allowed to change, and you're allowed to protect what matters to you while you do.
When we talk about wellness, especially through an osteopathic lens, we're not talking about perfection. We're talking about alignment, aligning your habits, your values, and your long-term goals so the system functions as a whole. And when that alignment slips, which it will, the goal isn't guilt, it's recalibration. And when you need to recalibrate, remind yourself of that way. Go back and reread that medical school personal statement that, poured your heart and soul into. Go look through your old posts on social media. Pick up things that you did in the past that will remind you of what brought you to this point in your career.
Yeah, remind yourself why you told your teacher, I want to be a doctor when I grow up.
And remind yourself it's okay to make mistakes, and it's okay for that motivation to change. As we grow and learn more about medicine, how we envision our lives will evolve, and that's just part of life.
Yes, your why is definitely allowed to change.
As we wrap up, I want to take a step back and kind of zoom out because we've covered a lot of ground. We've talked about academics, sleep, mental health, connection, and purpose. On the surface, those can feel like separate domains, different problems requiring different solutions. But through that lovely osteopathic lens we keep talking about, they're not really separate at all. They're parts of the same system. Osteopathic medicine teaches us that everything is connected, and when supported, balanced, and allowed to regulate, our bodies function and heal themselves well. What we've really been talking about is what happens when that balance is disrupted and how to restore it before dysfunction becomes disease. And I want to be clear, wellness is not about doing everything perfectly. If there's one myth I hope we dismantle today, it's the idea that good students or good doctors simply push harder and suffer quietly.
Struggle isn't a personal failure. It's important to remember that. It's often a signal or information that something in the system needs attention.
Precisely. In medicine, we're trained to listen to symptoms, to notice patterns, to intervene early when something is off. Wellness is just learning to apply that same clinical reasoning to ourselves. If you're exhausted, that's data. If you're disconnected, that's data. If you're losing motivation or joy, that's data. Those signals aren't asking you to quit, they're asking you to recalibrate. One of the most freeing realizations for me was understanding that medical school is not meant to be endured at the expense of my health. It's meant to shape us, but shaping doesn't require breaking. And this is where I think osteopathic principles are especially helpful. Even if those who don't strongly identify with philosophy, because at their core they're practical, they're about sustainability. Self-regulation doesn't mean never being stressed. Self-healing doesn't mean never needing help. Whole person care doesn't mean having everything figured out. It means recognizing that you are a system, and a system requires maintenance.
And maintenance doesn't have to be dramatic. Small, consistent adjustments matter more than big, short-lived overhauls.
That's why I don't want anyone listening to walk away feeling like they need to fix everything and make these sweeping changes. Instead, I'd invite you to choose one small change, something that supports regulation rather than depletion. Maybe it's protecting sleep, checking with a counselor or mentor, or reconnecting with a community or practice that reminds you who you are outside of school. Or maybe it's simply giving yourself permission to rest without guilt. Those aren't signs that you're falling behind. They are signs that you're thinking long term. Medicine needs physicians who are competent, compassionate, and sustainable. And sustainability doesn't start after residency or after boards. It starts now in the habits you build during training.
And you don't have to earn rest by burning out first. Rest isn't a reward, it's a requirement. And resting doesn't mean that you have to just veg out on your couch at home or take a nap. You can have fun, do things that bring you joy. Those can be forms of rest as well.
I love that. And it's definitely worth repeating. You don't have to earn rest by burning out first. So as you move forward, whether you're just starting medical school, in the thick of it, or further along, remember this: you are your most important patient. Treat yourself with the same curiosity, care, and respect you offer others. Pay attention to the system. Adjust when needed, and trust that health is something you can return to again and again when you support it properly. Thank you for listening. Take care of yourself and take care of each other.